Marco Lockwood.
And a very good morning to our federal Liberal member for Braddon, a very busy Gavin Pearce. Gav, good morning.
G'day, Mike. How are you? How are you listening?
All right, good. We're all well and fit. I'm well, to a point. I want to talk to you about, if I can, it was a very interesting release. I got a quote from yourself. It said, in a newspaper report, readers were informed that the Mayor of West Coast Council had written to Labor's Senator Urquhart asking that the region see more benefits from the economic growth in the area. And in responding to the media inquiry, Senator Urquhart said the Albanese Labor government is focused on ensuring that communities in Tasmania's west and northwest grow and prosper. And then you say if she'd included King Island in a reference, Senator Urquhart and I would have been a unity ticket.
Yeah, and often that's the case, Mike, for old King Island. The 1,500 people on King Island, and a great deal of our economic benefits for the state come out of King Island. I mean, 20% of the state's beef comes out of there, our seafood. We've got a tungsten mine there with the Dolphin 6 mine on King Island. Great community over there, and they're often dropped off the orbit and forgotten about.
Yeah, that's true, and it really is a good point you make. And I also felt for the West Coast, because they sometimes get a bit undercut, don't they?
Well, this is the thing, and quite often, and it was as I read the budget, I thought of the regions, and I stick up for the regions. I stick up for those small communities that we have out there. I mean, the West Coast alone, 52.5% of Tasmania's GDP. 52.5% out of the West Coast.
Unbelievable.
And I think sometimes those big capital cities with our teal seats, they often forget that.
What a good point. Those teal seats, they often do as well. Federal budget, I mean, that must have been interesting for you to see that, to sort of, well, the main thing we're talking about is cost of living pressures. There's certainly no immediate hit, isn't there?
No, there isn't, and inflation is going to eat us alive if we're not careful.
Totally.
This is reminiscent of what happened in the United States back in the 80s, and we all remember, or we've read of the Paul Volcker. He was the treasurer in the States at the time. Got to 20% interest rates before he was able to control inflation, because he understood full well that if inflation's left unchecked, then it will eat at cost of living pressures for everyone, and it's just a waste of time. So, we need to get a hold of it. Government, particularly energy costs. That's where I look at. I mean, energy affects everything, and it's not just energy as in when we turn the switch. It's our fuel costs. I look at the amount of heavy vehicles that we have on the road and the discrepancy that we have between diesel fuel and ULP, gasoline, up to 50% 50 cents a litre difference. And our logistics chain, everything that we grab off the shelf at Woolworths or Coles, everything that's in that shop comes as the result of diesel fuel being burnt, and it comes on trucks and trains and ships, all burning diesel.
Yeah, you're spot on. And the interesting part about the energy crisis is when I was reading a story some time back, they were saying next year we'll see an increase in power bills up to 35%. Well, now it's gone up to 56% possibly. I mean, this is nearly, it's just not affordable for some people to pay those kind of figures for power.
No, it isn't. And it's going to affect those that can't afford it the most. It's going to affect our vulnerable in our communities.
Absolutely.
How are they going to heat their homes? How are they going to, have a hot shower? How are they going to cook? How are they going to survive? And they can, as I said, least afford it.
What is I think of major concern is the calls we've been getting about the Cam River Bridge. I did receive I'd love your take on it, that from Michael Ferguson, Minister for Infrastructure and Transport, said, and a press release that came out this morning, that the Cam River Bridge has returned to two-lane operation from 6 a.m. today, following successful completion of repairs. Testing of the repaired and strengthened bridge was completed before dawn, he said. The results showing it's now safe to reopen. The new $18.8 million Cam River Bridge under construction will be higher, with deeper foundations into bedrock to withstand the risk posed by floods, wider lanes, cycle lane, pedestrian pathway providing more room for vehicles, cyclists, pedestrians, etc. All of that. But tell you what, it really does. You notice straight away, don't you, that just holds up everybody for nearly an hour if something goes wrong with that bridge.
Yeah, and it's a vital link as well, Mike. People don't realise, as well as the incredible inconvenience that's caused local commuters, our freight needs to get through. Our emergency services need to get through, and that links the west part of the electorate with the eastern part of the electorate. We've got milk, we've got livestock, we've got perishables coming out of the ground that needs to get to the Burnie or Devonport port. And that was severely impaired by that closure. And now I had lengthy discussions the whole way through this with Michael Ferguson, and he's been a busy boy. I think he genuinely has pulled out all straps to get that remedy as quickly as possible. But I just want to thank everybody for their patience. I've sat in that 3 or 4 hour wait myself, and I get it, but it just reinforces the fact that we need a second option there. We really do.
Oh, yeah.
Going back 3.5 years, that was one of my first announcements. I remember standing there on the shore of the bank of the river with the then Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, and we announced the sum of $40 million that was to be spent on that bridge and that upgrade, because I realised then that was one of the big things that was absolutely crucial. So that $40 million spend, I think we need to now look at an alternate route, particularly an alternate heavy route, so that we can get emergency services and our heavy logistics traffic through that.
I don't think anyone's going to argue with you with that, but the 40 million just suddenly went down to 18.8 for the new bridge.
Well, we've got a whole stack of, that was to ease the congestion on what we call a cooey crawl. So there's a whole stack of, roadworks that need to be done, traffic lights, and making the flow of traffic more efficient. So that was what that expenditure was for. So it was for the entire freight corridor, road corridor, and if we can include a second option, then I think that certainly needs to be examined.
Can I also, I don't know how dear to your heart this would be. Reading this press report, if you will, just 2 weeks before Remembrance Day on November 11, the Albanese Labor government has confirmed it will slash more than $2 million from a dedicated program to mark the private graves of First World War veterans. Now, the program had benefited from $3.7 million in funding under the previous coalition government after a pilot program placed 1,189 markers on the graves of men and women who had served in World War I. That must be a heck of a kick in the guts for you.
Oh, it's more than a kick in the guts. And, these are the unmarked graves of people that have put their life on the line and have died for the country. And there's a lady, her name's Andrea Gerard, and she heads up that program. And she's a beautiful lady that really has, she's concentrated her life on ensuring that those graves are marked and we remember our fallen soldiers. I made that commitment to her, and I was, when we made that commitment, of putting plaques on those unmarked graves, I felt as if we could have done more. And, I continue to say that what we should do as a government, so irrespective of who's in government, is that we should not rest until the very last grave is marked and we do justice to those that have given their life for the country.
It was amazing, and also reading that former Deputy Prime Minister and Shadow Minister for Veteran Affairs, of course we know Barnaby Joyce, said the very first, and I quote, the very first action of the Prime Minister was to dump the Minister for Veterans Affairs from Cabinet. The second action has been an attempted politicisation of the Australian War Memorial. The third action was to cut 8 veteran welfare hubs from the budget. I mean, that's a shocking result, and something that you probably, hopefully tucked that away so no one would hear about it.
Yeah, well, I certainly haven't tucked it away, Mike.
Yeah,
and,
good.
I raised this particularly, the removal of the Minister for Veterans Affairs and Defence Personnel from Cabinet. That meant that the Prime Minister heard firsthand every cabinet meeting exactly what that minister needed and exactly what our veterans needed, and that's been removed. So that obviously wasn't a priority for them. Well, it's a priority for me and it's a priority for our government. So I'm going to continue to fight that. When it comes to the War Memorial, the issue there was, they wanted to commemorate, Indigenous wars and other wars that have happened, separate to that of the commitment of forces to a war or warlike scenario as a result of defending the country. And we felt I certainly feel that isn't in the best interest of the War Memorial. And the War Memorial should be, not used for political purposes or to commemorate those conflicts or ideological, issues, and politics shouldn't creep into the War Memorial is what I'm saying.
And I totally agree with you. I've been there a couple of times now. It is an amazing place, and if anyone ever can get to visit it, do so in Canberra. It just is outstanding.
Absolutely.
It's outstanding. Tell me, moving on, you're opening stage 2 of the Penguin Foreshore Remediation and Upgrade Project.
The Great Wall of Penguin, Mike.
The Great Wall of Penguin.
No, well, we had an issue with Penguin, particularly after the 16 floods, where coastal erosion and the mouth of the river, the way that the currents work meant that the foreshore was falling into the Bass Strait, and what we were able to do is get a significant amount of money into the Central Coast Council so that they were able to shore up that, and they've done a fantastic job. Anyone that hasn't been to Penguin recently needs to get there and have a look at the job that they've done. And with most jobs, with most government funding, we invariably get the call for, we're running short on this and we need some more money. But it wasn't the case with the Central Coast Council, and Mayor Bond and Senator the GM of that council stretched that money and got literally kilometres more than what was initially planned for. So it's been a fantastic result, and it's certainly given the facelift that was so desperately needed for the Penguin foreshore.
And man, look, and all that hard work, it's great to see. I just absolutely love the Penguin foreshore. Interesting comments just come up in regard to the budget, and could I find out how much Australian families will be worse off? Apparently, Peter Dutton says Australian families will be $2,000 worse off by Christmas under the Labor budget.
And that's not counting in any additional increases in energy costs, Mike.
Yeah, correct.
People don't realise that energy costs, I spoke briefly, we talked about diesel. Well, diesel touches absolutely everything, and we're currently, in the silage season, in the harvest season, people are getting spud ground ready up here. We've got peas in. Well, that all took diesel to put that in the ground and to harvest that. And then a truck comes along and collects that produce, takes it to the port using diesel. And then the Sea Road Mersey and the Lucan and the toll boat all use diesel. And then it gets to the other end, and from there to the processor needs diesel. Our agricultural sector needs fertiliser, and that predominantly comes from the petrochemical industry. So all that nitrogenous fertiliser that farmers use needs diesel and needs gas. The reason for the increase in diesel and petrol is it's because that product, that crude oil, needs to be treated with gas to remove the sulphur from the diesel. So again, if we're not, as a government, putting the parameters in place so that the gas industry, the petrochemical industry, the refining industry can lower the costs and increase the supply of that product, then obviously it is going to have an effect. And that's what we're seeing now. Now, $2,000 is conservative. When we start talking, we then layer on top of that, we've got, the issue with Ukraine and Russia. We've got the issue with getting product through the South China Sea. we can't get Panamax vehicles into or vessels into, Russia, Ukraine, Baltic, the North Sea. That's where a lot of our fuel comes from. That's where our Brent crude comes from. Everything we see and touch is affected by, it comes back to that crude oil price. And it's touching every part of the economy. And that's where we need to concentrate on, is ensuring supply so that we can reduce the per unit cost. Now, what we've seen so far is this bang, bang, bang about a renewable world. Well, what that's done to the petrochemical companies is they're showing their middle finger to governments around the world. And we've seen the 2.5 billion barrel a day reduction in productivity, out of the Saudis when President Biden had a crack at them. Well, they've just reduced their output costs to ensure that their per barrel price is right. So, again, all governments, not just this one, but governments around the world need to respect the fact that that oil industry and that industry is important, and we need to manage it a lot more carefully than what we've done so far.
Australian Bureau of Stats data, they showed the price of essential goods and services climbed a massive 8.3%. That's over the year to September, off the back of surging food prices, 11% jump in gas prices, as you've touched on. Economists have predicted the cash rate rising today from 2.6 to 2.85% when the RBA board meet today, probably after the big race. And that a double hike was now, a prospect. The $275 that was promised within 3 years, well, I don't think that's going to happen for power bills. And with wages are poised to lift from 2.6% to only 3%. According to the RBA forecast, workers are going to face a prospect of 4.3% slump in real pay. Now, that's, according to the ABS, that's the worst drop in history of the data, stretching back to the late 1990s. I mean, there's a world of pain out there.
Everything's going up except people's wages.
Correct,
right?
Yeah.
Everything we touch. And, it again is going to affect those more desperate, more needy in our communities. Now, it's all very well and good to put that 43% reduction in emissions by 2030. Now, we had, 26 to 28% of reduction. We had a zero 2050 result, but we were of the opinion that it needed to be technology driven and it needed to come from industry first. Industry needed to balance it. When we start putting parameters onto industry like a 43% reduction, that means, as I said, 28,000 kilometres of poles and wires. Now, where's that going to go? It's going to go across prime agricultural land. It's going to go, across private property. Now, I asked a question the other day in Parliament. Those landowners, those farmers, how many of those are going to be affected by this? How are they going to get their centre pivot irrigators around? How are we going to grow the world's food? And then of course, the devastating floods that we've seen up the eastern seaboard in recent times, that's another layer of complexity that's being placed onto our food production. So again, the bill for those floods, I was around, I've driven around extensively around the electorate of Brad. The cost, those roads aren't just in need of a top coat. They're completely gone. And the cost of that, the bill of that is incredible. You look at the damage that's been done. You mentioned the Cam River Bridge. The additional cost onto that job is going to be enormous. And we've got roads closed, we've got land slips that are continuing to slip, and I spoke at length with Michael Ferguson yesterday. He's busting all stops to try and get those roads open. But like he says, the roads are still slipping, they're still moving.
Everything's saturated, yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just mention too that I just want to talk to you about the fact that you're going to be hosting Federal Environment Minister Tanya Plibersek down to Rosebery, and I hope she realises, that has a good look at it. And I've always said, forever that MMG employs around 500 workers. They generate up to about $181 million in taxes and royalties over, that's the next decade. They do amazing things. They employ all those families. I hope she has a good look at that before she sort of says, oh, no, we can't put the tailings dam there.
And you make a very valid point, and this is something, I've been on from the get-go. I've stood by that mine, MMG, and in fact the mineral resources sector on the West Coast from day dot. The previous minister, Susan Lee, got her down there. We walked the South Marion Oak Dam site, and she saw that, that had been logged previously. She saw it had been burnt out. She saw there'd been dozers through it. Well, that wasn't the picture that she was painted before she got there, and I hope that same picture, that real picture, is painted for Tanya Plibersek when she comes down. Because, we get back to, harping on, the cost of those renewables into the country means that more electric cars on the road. Where's the lithium going to come from? Where's the polymetallics that, the lead, copper, zinc, iron? Where's all that coming from? There isn't enough minerals in the ground to supply everyone in Australia with an electric car. It's just not possible.
It is.
I don't think that's thought this through. And at the same time, we've got MMG down there. All they want to do is build a tailings facility that will see them right for the next 50 years, and we can't even get that through. I look to the $8 million that we put into the Latrobe levy bank, and I said this from the get-go. There were processes that needed to go in around EPA and EPBC on burrowing crayfish. And I made the point then, if we don't get a wriggle on and get this through, you'll have a flood. The burrowing crayfish are going to be washed out in the middle of Bass Strait, and Latrobe's going to be underwater. Well, guess what, Mike? Exactly what did happen. So you can't have it both ways. We need to, these applications under the EPA and EPBC, yes, there's a process to go through. Yes, we need to look after the environment, but we can't kick the can down the road because we need that productivity, we need those minerals, and we need those jobs.
Oh, I can't agree more, and it's got to, and that's where I'm glad that you are hosting Tanya Plibersek down to Rosebery to have a bit of a look-see and get the first-hand reality about what that mine means, and not just to Rosebery, what it means to Tasmania. Gav, we've run out of time, but I really appreciate your time this morning.
Oh, good on you, Mike, and thanks for being real.
Good to talk to you, buddy. Gavin Pearce, Federal Liberal member for Braddon, with Tasmania Talks.